Mr. Rowan stepped out of the long black car with the quiet ease of a man who had spent most of his life surrounded by comfort, yet he tried hard not to look like it. He wore a simple gray jacket, plain shoes, and no watch on his wrist. He had learned long ago that people acted differently when they knew who he was. And today, he wanted to walk through the town like an ordinary visitor. The small town was far away from the noise of the city. The streets were narrow and lined with old shops, and the air smelled of roasted nuts and warm bread. Vendors called out to customers. Children ran between stalls. And people moved with the slow rhythm of a place. Everyone knew everyone. Rowan had come here to look at a piece of land for a project he was thinking about. But that was just the reason he told other people. The truth was, he had been feeling empty for months. His life had become a cycle of meetings, numbers, and deals. He lived in a glass house high above the city, yet he felt trapped. So when he heard about this town, a place people described as peaceful and honest, he decided to visit. He wanted to breathe different air and see life that wasn't covered in luxury. He walked slowly through the market street, looking at the handmade crafts, colorful clothes, and small fruit stalls. People barely noticed him, which was exactly what he wanted. He blended into the crowd, different from the world he usually lived in. He didn't hear the constant buzz of phones, didn't see anyone staring at screens. Instead, he heard laughter, simple conversations, and the soft chatter of families buying their daily groceries. As Rowan reached into his pocket to pay for a small bag of roasted nuts, he didn't realize that the wallet, thick, heavy, and obviously expensive, slipped out of his jacket. It fell quietly onto the ground, nearly hidden under a tablecloth fluttering in the breeze. Rowan continued walking, chewing the nuts without noticing a thing. A few steps behind him, two sisters walked together, one slightly older than the other. The older girl, Lena, had her hair tied in a loose ponytail. Her clothes were clean but worn, and her sandals looked like they had traveled miles. The younger girl, Mira, held a small paper bag with a few vegetables. She walked with bright steps, humming softly as she tried to keep up with her sister. Mira was the first to notice the wallet. She stopped suddenly and tugged on Lena's arm. "APA. Look," she whispered, pointing at the ground. Lena turned and her eyes widened. She bent down and picked up the wallet, weighing it for a second. It was heavy, smooth, and clearly belonged to someone rich. She looked around and quickly spotted Rowan's figure moving through the crowd. "That uncle dropped it," Lena said. "Should we open it?" Mira asked innocently. "No," Lena said firmly. "We'd just return it." "Come on." The girls hurried through the crowd. Myra nearly bumped into a fruit stand, and Lena had to hold her wrist to keep her steady. They called out politely, but Rowan couldn't hear them over the noise of the market. So they ran faster when they finally reached him. Lena tapped his arm lightly. "Excuse me, Uncle," she said, slightly out of breath. "You dropped this." Rowan turned, confused at first. Then he saw the wallet in her hand. His eyes widened slightly. "Oh, thank you," he said, taking it from her. "I didn't even notice. It was on the ground," Mira said. "We thought someone else might take it." Rowan studied their faces open, honest and surprisingly calm. They didn't look like they were waiting for a reward. They didn't even look curious about what might be inside the wallet. He opened it quickly to check if everything was there. Not because he didn't trust them, but because he was amazed by the situation. Yes, everything was untouched. Cards, cash, documents, everything. "You both did a very kind thing," Rowan said sincerely. "Please take something for your honesty." Lena shook her head immediately. "We don't need anything. It wasn't ours." "But you returned it," Rowan insisted. "Most people wouldn't." "We only did what we should do," Lena said softly. Myra nodded, the quiet support in her small expression touching Rowan more than he expected. He wanted to say more, to ask them about themselves, to at least know their names. But the girl stepped back politely. "Okay, Uncle. We need to go home now," Lena said. "Our grandmother is waiting." Before he could stop them, they turned and walked away, their small figures disappearing into the flow of the market. Rowan watched them leave, feeling something unusual in his chest. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't shock. It was something closer to curiosity mixed with admiration. He had met thousands of people in his life, businessmen, investors, leaders, but very few who acted without expecting something in return. The world he lived in was built on deals, exchanges, and hidden motives. Yet those two girls had shown honesty without hesitation. Rowan paid the vendor for the nuts and placed the wallet carefully in his inner pocket. He started walking again, but found that he couldn't get the sisters out of his mind. Their voices, their sincerity, and the way they refused any reward, it all played again in his thoughts. He walked past several stalls, but instead of paying attention to the shops, he glanced around to see if he could spot them again. He felt strange doing it, almost foolish, but he couldn't stop himself. He told himself he just wanted to make sure they reached home safely. But a deeper part of him knew there was more to it. After a few minutes, he saw them again. The girls were walking side by side, carrying their small bags of groceries. They took a turn down a narrow side street. Something about their calm steps made him follow quietly behind, keeping enough distance not to be noticed. The street was quieter than the market. The houses here were old, some with cracked walls, some with broken gates. Children played barefoot while neighbors chatted outside their doors. The girls walked naturally, as if this was their everyday path. Rowan slowed his pace as they reached a small house at the end of the lane. The roof was patched with sheets of metal, and the wooden door had scratches from age. Yet the small front area was swept clean. A few pots with plants sat near the steps, giving a tiny touch of life to the worn-out place. The girls entered the house, calling out softly, "Dottie, we're home." Rowan stood at the corner of the street, not close enough to be seen, but close enough to hear faint sounds from the house. He waited, observing the simple life unfolding in front of him. He saw the grandmother through the window, a thin woman sitting on a wooden chair. She greeted the girls with a warm smile. Despite the clear signs of hardship around them, there was a warmth in the home that even Rohan could feel from where he stood. Mira showed her grandmother the vegetables they bought. Lena walked to the side of the house and filled a small bucket with water. The girls moved with a routine shaped by necessity, no complaints, no signs of frustration, just simple acceptance. Rowan felt something tug inside him. He didn't know why he was still standing there. Maybe because he couldn't understand how people with so little could remain so true in their actions. He leaned lightly against a wall, still watching. The grandmother reached out and gently touched Lena's cheek, as if proud of her. Myra laughed at something, a bright sound that floated into the street. Rowan realized he hadn't heard a sound like that in a long time. His life was full of polished conversations and forced laughter, but nothing that came from a simple joy. He wondered how many times the girls had seen something on the ground, something valuable, and chosen not to pick it up. How many times they had put other people's needs before their own. The setting sun painted the sky in soft orange colors, and the lane became quieter. Rowan stood there until he felt he might draw attention. Finally, he stepped away, walking slowly back toward the market. On his way, he kept thinking of the sisters, their honesty, their sincerity, and their quiet strength. He had come to this town looking for land, but perhaps there was something else here for him, something he didn't even know he needed. When he reached the main street, he stopped for a moment and looked back at the direction he came from. He made a decision without fully understanding it yet. Tomorrow, he would return. He wanted to learn more, not out of pity, not out of guilt, but because something inside him felt lighter after meeting those girls. It was as if they had reminded him of something he had forgotten long ago. As he walked back to his car, Rowan felt a strange sense of hope, the kind he hadn't felt in years. The kind that comes not from wealth or success, but from witnessing a small, genuine act that touches the heart in ways nothing else can. When morning light gently slipped over the rooftops of the quiet town, Mr. Rowan was already awake. He had barely slept during the night. His thoughts kept circling back to the two sisters who had returned his wallet so honestly. Their faces, their calm voices, the way they refused any reward, all of it stayed with him. He didn't fully understand why their simple kindness had settled so deeply inside him, but he knew he wasn't done thinking about them. He stepped out of the small guest house where he was staying. The air was crisp and cool, carrying the smell of tea from the nearby shops, preparing for another day. His driver waited by the car, but Rowan raised a hand. "Not today," he said. "I'll walk." The driver nodded respectfully, though he looked surprised. Billionaires didn't usually walk anywhere, but Rowan wasn't interested in living like one right now. He wanted to blend into the town again, to feel the rhythm of life here. He slipped his hands into his pockets and made his way back toward the market street. The sun was still low, spreading soft light over the stalls. Vendors were opening their wooden shutters, sweeping the fronts of their shops, and arranging their goods. A few early customers were already bargaining politely. Rowan walked slowly. Passing the fruit stall, the tea man, the shop with colorful fabrics hanging in the doorway, the world was familiar, yet new. He had walked through many places, from cities filled with lights to countries filled with luxury. But something about this small town felt grounding. He found himself scanning the crowd again, looking for the two sisters, not in an intrusive way but with quiet interest. He wondered if they came to the market early in the morning, maybe to buy something fresh before heading to school. He wondered how they managed their days, how they balanced studying, chores, and looking after their grandmother. Hours seemed to pass slowly, though in truth it was only a short time before he spotted them again. They were walking together, just like the day before. Lena held a small cloth bag close to her chest, and Mira carried another one that looked even lighter. There was something steady about the way. Lena walked as if she had taken on responsibilities far beyond her age. Mira, though younger, moved with a playful bounce, as if she found small joy in every step. Rowan watched them for a moment before stepping forward. He didn't want to frighten them, so he approached with a gentle smile. "Good morning," he said. Both girls turned in surprise. Mira's eyes lit up with recognition. Lena blinked, then smiled politely. "Good morning, Uncle," Lena replied. "You're up early," Rowan said. "We come to buy some things before school," Lena explained. Mira nodded quickly. "And the vegetables are cheaper in the morning," she added. Rowan chuckled. "That's smart." There was a short, comfortable silence. The girls stood calmly, not nervous, but not overly familiar either. They behaved with the quiet dignity Rowan had already noticed. "I wanted to thank you again for returning my wallet yesterday," Rowan said sincerely. "You're welcome," Lena said softly. Rowan hesitated for a moment. He didn't want them to think he was trying to interfere, but he also didn't want to walk away without learning more. "If you don't mind," he began, "could I walk with you for a while?" Lena exchanged a quick glance with Mira, who gave a tiny nod. "Okay," Lena said simply. Rowan walked beside them as they went from stall to stall. He carried no intention other than listening and observing. He watched how Lena carefully chose each vegetable, checking for freshness. He watched Mira count coins, making sure they didn't spend a single extra rupee. "Do you two do all the shopping yourselves?" Rowan asked gently. "Yes," Lena answered. "Our grandmother can't walk far, so we take care of it." Rohan nodded thoughtfully. "And do you go to school after this?" "Yes," Lena said. "We won't be late. School is close to home." Mira smiled proudly. "I never miss school, even when it rains." "That's wonderful," Rowan said warmly. They finished buying a few small items, and then the girls turned toward the lane where Rowan had followed them the previous day. He hesitated for a moment, wondering if he should walk that far. But then Lena looked back at him. "Uncle, are you going this way too?" she asked kindly. Rowan smiled. "Yes, I suppose I am." As they walked down the quieter street, Rowan noticed details he had missed the day before: the cracked pavement, the sound of distant birds, the faint laughter of children playing nearby. When they reached the small house again, the grandmother was waiting at the doorway. She leaned slightly on a wooden stick, but smiled warmly when she saw her granddaughters. "You're back early," she said. Then her attention shifted to Rowan. Her expression softened, but grew. "Curious? This is the uncle we told you about," Myra said proudly before Rowan could introduce himself. The grandmother clasped her hands together. "Thank you," she said. "Not many people would return to say another thank you." Rowan shook his head. "It is I who should be thanking them." The grandmother invited him inside, but Rowan politely declined. "Another day, perhaps," he said. He didn't want to rush anything, didn't want to step into their home without earning that level of trust. Lena placed the small bags on the wooden table inside. Mira helped her grandmother sit down. Rowan observed quietly from the doorway, admiring the way they moved around each other with natural care. "Do you work in this town, Uncle?" Mira asked suddenly. Rowan chuckled softly. Something like that. He didn't want to lie, but he wasn't ready to reveal everything yet. Lena studied him for a moment, her eyes thoughtful and calm. She didn't ask any further questions, respecting his privacy. Rowan stepped back slowly. "I should get going," he said. "I didn't mean to take your morning time." "You didn't," the grandmother replied warmly. "Good people bring good time with them." Those words made Rowan pause. He had heard many flattering words in his life, spoken by people wanting something from him. But this simple sentence carried no hidden intention. It felt pure. "Thank you," Rowan said quietly. He walked away slowly, but something inside him had already shifted. He felt lighter, calmer, more grounded. The world looked different, not because the town had changed, but because something in his heart was waking up. He walked until he reached a small tea stall and took a seat on a wooden bench. The tea seller poured him a hot cup, placing it in front of him with a smile. "You're new here," the seller said. "Yes," Rowan replied. "You seem like a thoughtful man," the seller added. Unaware of who he truly was, Rowan smiled faintly. "Just trying to understand things." The seller nodded, as if he had heard that from many visitors. "This town teaches people things if they stay long enough." Rohan glanced toward the lane where the girls lived. "I believe that," he said softly. He sipped the tea slowly, letting the warm taste settle in his chest. As he sat there, he watched people going about their daily lives. No rush, no show, no competition. Just life simple and real. After a while, Rowan stood up and decided to walk around the town more. He visited the school the girls had mentioned, watched children gather inside its old gates, and wondered how the sisters managed. Everything was so much responsibility on their shoulders. His steps led him back toward the area with the houses. He walked through different streets, observing the small shops, the old buildings, and the people chatting outside their homes. At one corner, he saw a group of neighbors repairing a broken wall together. No one was arguing about who should do more. They simply worked as a team, talking with smiles on their faces. Rowan watched quietly. This kind of community spirit was rare where he came from. In his world, people hired others to fix problems. But here, people fixed them together. He continued walking until he reached a shady tree. Taking a seat beneath it, he let the calmness wash over him. He didn't know why he felt so drawn to this place, but something inside him told him he was here for a reason. For the first time in a long while, Rowan allowed himself to sit in silence. No phone, no assistant, no meeting schedule. He simply sat and watched life unfold around him, feeling more connected than he had in years. Later in the afternoon, he found himself back near the girls' home. He wasn't planning to go inside, but as he passed by quietly, he overheard soft coughing from inside the house. It must have been the grandmother. Rowan felt a wave of concern. He stayed for a moment, listening to the girls speak softly to their grandmother. Their voices were gentle, filled with patience. He took a step back, realizing he was lingering too long. But the concern didn't leave him. He decided he would visit them properly soon, this time with something thoughtful, something helpful. For now, he returned to his guest house. As he walked through the town again, he noticed something he hadn't seen before, the way people smiled when they passed each other. The way they greeted elders, the way children shared small snacks with friends. There was a quiet beauty in everything here. When Rowan finally reached his room, he sat on the small sofa and closed his eyes. He had come to this town for business, but something deeper was pulling him toward these people, especially the two girls who had touched his heart with their honesty. He knew one thing for sure. He wasn't leaving anytime soon. And tomorrow, he would return to see them again. The next morning arrived with a soft breeze, carrying the quiet sounds of people waking up and beginning their day. Birds perched on rooftops, singing lightly as if announcing the start of something new. Mr. Rowan opened his eyes slowly, feeling a strange sense of calm, something he hadn't felt in a long time. The town had a way of settling inside him, softening the noise he carried from his old life. He sat by the window of the guest house and watched as the streets slowly filled with people. Shopkeepers lifted their shutters, children hurried along the road with their school bags, and neighbors exchanged warm greetings. Life here moved gently, yet it was full of sincerity, full of connection. Rowan dressed simply once again, choosing clothes that didn't reflect his wealth. He didn't want to stand out, and more importantly, he didn't want the girls or their grandmother to treat him differently. What he sought was honesty, and he hoped to offer the same in return. After a brief breakfast, he walked toward the little market street. His steps were steady, though his mind was filled with restless thoughts about how he would approach the girls' home today. He didn't want to seem intrusive or make them uncomfortable. He only wanted to understand their world better. When he reached the market, he noticed it was livelier than the day before. Vendors were busier, customers negotiated good-naturedly, and music played softly from a far corner. In the midst of the bustling crowd, he spotted Lena and Mira. They were standing at a vegetable stall, choosing tomatoes. Lena handled each one carefully, checking for freshness, while Mira counted coins in her small hand. Rowan felt a gentle warmth seeing them. Their simple routines carried a quiet discipline he admired. He approached with a friendly smile. "Good morning." Both girls turned. Mira's face lit up instantly, but Lena smiled politely, still a little reserved. "Good morning, Uncle," she replied. Rowan crouched slightly so he was at their height. "Doing your morning shopping again?" "Yes," Lena said. "We need to cook early today." "What's the occasion?" Rowan asked. "Nothing special," Mira answered. "Dottie said she wants to make something warm because the weather is turning cold." Rowan nodded thoughtfully. "She must be a good cook." Both girls smiled at that. "She makes the best food," Mira said proudly, after buying their vegetables. The girls began walking toward the lane where they lived. Rowan walked with them again, keeping his pace gentle. "How's your grandmother today?" he asked. "She's better," Lena said. "But she gets tired easily." There was quiet concern in her voice, the kind a child shouldn't have to carry. Rowan felt a tug in his chest. It reminded him of something he often ignored in his own life, how distant he was from the people he cared about. When they reached the small house, the grandmother was sitting outside, absorbing the morning sunlight. Her face lit up when she saw Rowan. "You're back," she said warmly, as though welcoming an old friend. Rowan nodded respectfully. "I hope it's all right." The grandmother waved her hand. "Good people are always welcome." Her words touched him deeply. Lena and Mira unpacked the vegetables while Rowan stood near the door, feeling a mixture of admiration and quiet sadness. The house was in poor condition. The roof sagged on one side, and cracks spread across the walls. The doorframe was old, and one of the windows was patched with cardboard. "Your home is very peaceful," Rowan said gently, not wanting to sound pitying. The grandmother chuckled softly. "Peace is easy when you have love, even if you don't have much else." Rowan looked at her, deeply moved. He had built a life full of wealth, yet these simple words struck him harder than any business lesson. Mira suddenly tugged at his sleeve. "Uncle, will you come inside today?" Dottie made tea. He didn't want to impose, but the grandmother nodded. "Please. You are a guest now." So he stepped inside. The house was small, with only 2 rooms. The walls were old but clean. A few simple drawings made by the girls were taped near a shelf. A thin rug covered the floor. Everything had been placed carefully, with love and care. Mira brought him a small cup of tea, her little hand steady. "Be careful, it's hot." Rowan smiled. "Thank you." He sipped the tea. It was warm, fragrant, and comforting. The kind of tea that felt like a gentle hug as he sat on the simple wooden chair. He watched the girls prepare the vegetables, chatting softly with their grandmother. The scene felt peaceful, almost sacred. It was the picture of a family doing their best, despite hardship. The grandmother looked at Rowan with kind eyes. "You remind me of someone I knew long ago," she said softly. Rowan asked. "A man who forgot how to rest." She replied with a wise smile. Rowan blinked, unsure how she had guessed so accurately. You think I look tired? I think you look like someone searching for something, she said simply. Her words struck him harder than he expected. For years he had been running through life, building companies, making decisions, and chasing more without knowing why. Maybe he was searching. Maybe he had been lost without realizing it. To change the subject gently, Rowan asked, How long have you lived here? Since before the girls were born, the grandmother said. Their parents lived here too. Rowan waited quietly, allowing her to choose whether she wanted to continue. They passed away many years ago, she said softly. A road accident. Since then, it is just us three. Rowan's heart tightened. He looked at Lena and Myra, who continued their work quietly. He couldn't imagine the strength it took for the grandmother to raise them alone. I'm sorry, he said softly. The grandmother nodded gently, accepting his sympathy with grace. Life doesn't stop for sadness. You keep walking. Rowan admired her spirit, her courage, and the kind of wisdom that came from real struggle. After a while, Mira sat beside him and asked, Uncle, what work do you do? Rowan smiled. I do a bit of everything. That means you're very busy, Lena said, joining the conversation. Yes, Rowan admitted. Sometimes too busy? Do you like your work? Mira asked. Rowan paused. No one had asked him that in a very long time. Employees asked about deadlines, partners asked about profits, but no one asked if he liked what he did. I used to, he said honestly. Now, I'm not sure. Lena nodded quietly, as if she understood more than she let on. You should take a break sometimes, Mira suggested innocently. Her simple advice made Rowan laugh softly. I think you're right. Time moved gently in the small house. The warmth of the tea, the peaceful conversation, and the simple kindness made Rowan feel like he had stepped into another world. A world he didn't want to leave too quickly. When he finally stood up to leave, the grandmother walked him to the door. You are welcome any time, she said. I will return soon, Rowan promised, as he stepped back onto the street. He felt a strange pull to stay longer, to do something meaningful for this family. But he knew he had to be careful. He wanted to help, not out of pity, but out of respect. He wandered through the town for a while, thinking deeply. He passed a group of children playing in the dirt, laughing loudly. He saw a shopkeeper helping an old man carry a heavy bag. Everywhere he looked, people took care of each other. Eventually, Rowan reached a small bench under a large tree. He sat down and let out a long breath. The grandmother's words echoed in his mind. You look like someone searching for something. What was he searching for? Peace, meaning, connection? Maybe all of them. A few minutes later, an elderly man from the neighborhood sat beside him. You're the stranger who's been visiting the girl's house, the man said, not unkindly. Rowan nodded. Yes, they were kind to me. They're kind to everyone, the man said with a smile. Those girls have hearts bigger than their home. Rowan looked at him with interest. Do they have any help besides their grandmother? The man shook his head. No, they manage everything on their own. School, housework, taking care of their Dottie, everything. Rowan felt a surge of admiration. These young girls were carrying responsibilities many adults couldn't bear. The man continued, but they never complain. They never ask anyone for help. They're proud, but in a good way. They believe in working hard. Rohan nodded slowly. He already knew that from the way they behaved. As the day began to warm, Rowan stood up from the bench. His thoughts were clearer now. He understood something important. The girls and their grandmother were not just surviving, they were living with grace, dignity, and kindness, despite hardships. He walked back to the small market, bought a basket filled with fresh fruits, warm bread, and a few simple treats, and made his way again to the girl's home. When he knocked, Lena opened the door and blinked in surprise when she saw the basket. Uncle, what is this? She asked softly. Just something I wanted to bring, Rowan said gently. Your grandmother should have good food, and you too should enjoy something sweet once in a while. Lena hesitated. Mira appeared behind her and gasped softly at the sight of the basket. But Lena began. You returned something valuable to me, Rowan said. This is nothing compared to that. The grandmother stepped forward slowly. "If you brought this with a good heart, then we will accept it with a good heart." Rowan nodded, relieved. He handed the basket to the girls, who carried it inside carefully. Mira peeked at the items inside and smiled brightly. Rowan stepped back. "I'll visit again tomorrow," he said. "We'll be here," Lena replied. As Rowan walked away, he felt a deep sense of purpose forming inside him. He had met this family by accident, yet they were teaching him more about life than he had learned in years. He didn't know what the next days would bring, but he knew he was ready to find out, because something inside him had already begun to change. Rowan woke up early. The next morning, with a strange mix of excitement and worry resting on his mind, he had spent much of the night thinking about Lena, Mira, and their grandmother. Their kindness had settled into him in a way he could not explain. He had met thousands of people in his life, some powerful, some famous, some willing to do anything to impress him. But rarely had he met people who lived with so little and still carried such pure hearts. And now he wanted to help, but he also wanted to understand them better. He wanted to make sure his help did not take away their dignity. He wanted to be careful. He knew that if he arrived at their house again with expensive gifts, they would refuse. They were the type who only accepted what they needed, nothing more. So he spent the early hours making a quiet plan. He called a trusted worker from one of his charities, a woman he knew for years who had a gentle heart and a calm way of speaking. He asked her to visit the family, pretending to be from a local support group. His idea was simple. He wanted to see how the girls reacted when help was offered, without any connection to him. By the time the sun rose fully, the charity worker reached the old neighborhood. The street was unusually quiet, with only a few birds calling out from nearby rooftops and a gentle breeze brushing the dust across the ground. The woman knocked on the small wooden door, holding a humble cloth bag of items. A moment later, Lena opened the door, surprised but polite. The woman explained softly that she represented a small-town charity, and someone had mentioned that their grandmother needed medicine. She offered the bag, saying it contained a few essentials, just basic things. It's nothing too costly. Lena looked at the bag, then at her sister Mira, and then back at the woman. She hesitated. Her hands remained by her sides, not moving to take the bag. For a moment, it seemed like she might reject it altogether. But then she noticed the calm look in the woman's eyes, a look that held no judgment and no expectation. Slowly, Lena accepted the bag. "Thank you," she said in a quiet voice. "But this is already too much. We don't need anything more than this. Please give the rest of the help to people who need it more." The woman smiled and nodded. She assured them that the charity helped many families, and there was no limit on kindness. But still, Lena insisted they accept only the medicine and maybe 2 small items. She even tried to return some of the food inside the bag. When the woman left, she felt deeply moved. She had met many families in need over the years. Some grabbed every bit of help they could get, some asked for more, some cried with gratitude. But this was the first time she met 2 children who only wanted to take what was necessary and leave the rest for others. She immediately called Rowan, who was waiting near his hotel with his phone in hand. When he heard her voice and listened to the details, he felt both joy and sadness rise in him. Joy, because these girls were even more honest than he imagined. Sadness, because life had forced them to become so careful and responsible at such a young age. After the call ended, Rowan sat quietly and looked out of the large glass window of his hotel room. The morning sun painted the entire view in soft gold, but his mind kept returning to the girls' small house, their grandmother's kind eyes, and the way Lena had gently refused anything that felt more than necessary. He felt admiration. But along with that came a question he could not shake. Why did life treat good people with such harshness? Why did those who had the purest hearts often have the hardest lives? He wished he had an answer, but he didn't. So he decided he would act instead. He planned to return to the girls that evening and reveal who he truly was. But as the day went on, dark clouds began gathering over the town. The quiet morning sky slowly shifted into something heavy and threatening. By late afternoon, the wind grew stronger, carrying the scent of rain. Shops began closing early, and people hurried home. calling out warnings about a storm. Rowan watched this from the window of a small roadside cafe where he had stopped for tea. He placed the cup down and immediately grew uneasy. If the storm was as bad as the locals were saying, the small, weak roof of the girl's home would not survive. Memories of the leaks they had mentioned came rushing into his mind. He knew they had been saving coins for weeks just to repair a single part of the roof, without hesitating. Rowan stood up and left the cafe, heading straight for his car. He called one of his local teams people who worked in construction and emergency repairs for his company. Even though they were surprised to hear from him, they immediately prepared equipment. Rowan told them to meet him near the edge of the old neighborhood. By the time he reached the outskirts, the storm had already begun. Heavy rain slapped against the windshield, and thunder rolled through the sky. The streets were mostly empty, except for a few people rushing to shelter. Rowan stepped out of the car, rain pounding against his jacket, and hurried toward the small house. When he reached the familiar narrow lane, his heart dropped. Water streamed through the cracks in the roof. The weak structure groaned under the pressure of the wind. It was clear the house would not survive long under this storm. Inside, Lena and Mira were trying their hardest to place buckets and pots under the leaks. Their grandmother sat on a small chair, worried but trying to stay calm for the children. Lightning flashed, illuminating the worn interior. Rowan knocked loudly, and Lena rushed to open the door. Her eyes widened at the sight of him, drenched, breathless, obviously concerned. "You need to come out right now," he said urgently. "It's not safe inside." The girls did not ask questions. They grabbed a shawl for their grandmother and carefully guided her outside. Rowan helped steady her as the wind pushed against them. They hurried toward the covered area near the entrance of the neighborhood, where Rowan's team had already arrived with tools, flashlights, and emergency gear. The workers quickly used temporary supports to prevent the roof from collapsing further. They covered the worst gaps with strong sheets. They worked fast, even as the rain beat down on their backs. The grandmother sat under the sheltered area, looking worried. "We didn't expect such a storm," she murmured. Rowan knelt beside her, trying his best to reassure her. "You're safe now. That's what matters." Lena and Myra stayed close to their grandmother, shivering from the cold and fear. The storm raged on for nearly an hour, but the emergency barriers held strong enough to protect the house from collapsing entirely. Once the worst of the rain passed, Rowan finally allowed himself to breathe. He realized that this moment could not wait any longer. The storm had pushed everything forward. It was time to tell them the truth. He asked them to follow him to a nearby dry spot beneath a large cement arch that protected them from the dripping rooftop of a shop. The wind still hummed, and rain still fell in thin curtains, but it was quiet enough for them to talk. Rowan looked at the three of them, their clothes damp, their eyes tired, but their spirits unbroken. And then he took a deep breath. "I need to tell you something," he began softly. "Something I should have told you earlier." Lena and Myra exchanged confused glances. The grandmother waited silently, her hands resting on her lap. Rowan felt his heart beat hard against his chest. "I didn't meet you by accident," he said. "And I'm not just a simple traveler." Lena frowned. "Then who are you?" He hesitated for a moment, then spoke plainly. "My name is Rowan." He paused, letting the name settle. "And I'm the owner of Rowan Enterprises." The grandmother gasped quietly. Lena and Myra stared, not fully understanding at first. But then Lena's eyes widened. "You mean, you're that Rohan? The one who appeared in newspapers sometimes? The one people in town spoke about with awe? The one who built hospitals, schools, and large companies?" "Yes," he said gently. "That Rowan?" Silence fell between them. The girls stood frozen. The grandmother covered her mouth with her hand. Rowan continued in a calm voice. "I didn't want to come to you as a rich man. I wanted to meet you as a normal person because I wanted to understand who you were. And now I do. You are honest. You are kind. You care for others even when you barely have enough for yourselves." The grandmother's eyes softened with tears. Mira held her sister's hand tightly. Rowan felt his throat tighten. "Today, when I saw the storm, I became afraid for you. I couldn't sit still. I had to come. I had to help. He did not tell them everything he planned. He wanted to share the rest once they were safe and calm. But even saying this much lifted something heavy inside him. The grandmother finally spoke, her voice trembling. You helped us even before we knew who you were. That means more than any name or company. Rowan lowered his head slightly, humbled by her words. Around them, the storm began to weaken. The wind softened. The clouds lifted. The workers finished reinforcing the little house enough to survive the night, as the rain slowed to a gentle drizzle. Rowan looked at the family once more and promised quietly, This is not the end of my help. I will make sure you never face something like this again. He meant every word, and deep in his heart. He knew that the next day would begin a new chapter for him and for them. The night finally settled into a calm silence after the storm passed. But the emotions inside Rowan's heart were far from calm. He stood under the soft drizzle with Lena, Mira, and their grandmother, thinking about everything that had happened and everything he still wanted to do for them. The rain had weakened, but the streets were still wet, reflecting faint lights from nearby shops. It all felt unreal. It's like the world had paused for a moment so they could breathe. The girls were still trying to process his reveal. Even though Rowan had explained who he was, the truth felt too big to fit into their minds so quickly. They weren't used to meeting wealthy people, and they definitely weren't used to seeing someone like that standing in the rain with them, helping them without expecting anything. Rowan suggested they wait a little longer under the protected arch before returning home, just until the workers finished checking the last parts of the roof. Lena nodded quietly, still unsure how to react. Mira stayed close to her grandmother, her small fingers gripping the older woman's hand tightly. The grandmother kept glancing at Rowan with a soft, searching look, trying to understand his intentions. After a few minutes, Rowan finally broke the silence. His voice was gentle but firm, as if he had made a decision he had been thinking about all night. You don't have to live like this anymore, he said. Not with a roof that leaks. Not with worries every day. I can help if you allow me to. Lena raised her head slowly. You already helped us today, she said. We don't want to be a burden. Rohan smiled sadly. You're not a burden. You never will be. Kindness deserves kindness. And you showed me something very rare, something money can't buy. The grandmother looked down at her hands, emotion pulling at her face. We don't like taking too much, she said softly. We only take what we need. That's how I raise them. I know, Rowan replied. That's exactly why I want to help you. You don't take more than you need, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't have more. You deserve a safe home. You deserve a chance to dream without fear. The grandmother's eyes glistened. But why us? Rowan paused. It wasn't an easy question, not because he didn't know the answer, but because saying it out loud carried weight. Because you reminded me of something I forgot a long time ago, he said quietly. I've spent years building companies, attending meetings, chasing success. Somewhere in all that noise, I lost sight of simple goodness. You brought it back to me. He looked at Lena and Mira. You returned my wallet when no one was watching. You accepted only what you needed from the charity. You shared what little you had with your neighbors. You live with honesty that many people with far more money don't have. That kind of goodness is powerful. It changed something inside me. Grandmother exhaled slowly, deeply moved before anyone could speak again. One of the construction workers approached them, wiping rain from his forehead. Sir, the house is safe for the night, he told Rowan. We secured the roof enough to handle the rest of the rain. Tomorrow morning, we can come back and start real repairs. Rowan nodded. Thank you. The worker gave the family a kind smile before heading back toward the trucks. When the three returned to their house, they saw the temporary repairs and the effort the workers had put into protecting it. The roof still looked worn, but it no longer sagged dangerously. Water no longer dripped from every corner. The small, humble home felt a little safer. The grandmother thanked Rowan again, her voice soft and emotional. Rowan walked them inside carefully. The girls placed the buckets back where they belonged, though this time most of them stayed empty. The house felt cold, so Mira hurried to bring out a tiny lantern and placed it on the small table. Its warm glow filled the room. Rowan took a seat on a low wooden stool, feeling more at home than he ever felt in any luxury office. He looked at the three faces in front of him, tired, humble, hopeful, and he knew this moment would stay with him forever. "I want to tell you about what I plan to do," Rowan said, "but I want to know how you feel first." "I don't want to make decisions for you." Lena exchanged a look with her grandmother before asking, "What do you mean?" Rowan leaned forward slightly. "Tomorrow morning, I'd like to send a full team to fix your house. Not just temporary repairs. I want to rebuild the roof properly, make the walls strong, and fix the windows. And after that," he hesitated, wanting to choose the right words. "After that, I want to make sure your grandmother gets the medical care she needs." Mira's eyes widened. "All of that?" "Yes," Rowan said, with a small smile. "All of that." The grandmother opened her mouth to object, but Rowan gently raised his hand. "I know you're worried about accepting too much. So let me say this clearly. This isn't charity. This is gratitude." "Gratitude?" Lena asked softly. "Yes, you've changed my life without even knowing it." They stared at him quietly, unsure how to respond. Rowan continued, "I came to this town looking at land for a new project. I was thinking only about business. But meeting you made me realize something important. Wealth means nothing if you forget how to use it to help others. You reminded me of that. So helping you isn't me doing a favor, it's me becoming the person I should have been all along." The grandmother pressed a hand to her chest, overwhelmed. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Rowan replied warmly. "Just allow me to help." For a long moment, the small room fell silent. The only sound was the soft tapping of leftover raindrops sliding down the edges of the temporary roof. Finally, Lena took a slow breath. "If you really want to help, then we accept. But only if it doesn't trouble you. We don't want you to think we're taking advantage of your kindness." Rowan smiled softly. "You could never take advantage of me. Your honesty is your strength. I respect it." The grandmother nodded gently, wiping the corner of her eye. "I also want to do something else," Rowan added. "Something bigger." The girls looked up curiously. Rowan said, "I want to help not just you, but other families who struggle the way you do. I want to build a community center here somewhere people can receive food, get education and support without feeling ashamed. And I want you three to be part of it." Mira tilted her head. "Part of it? But how?" Rowan smiled. "You can help guide us. You understand the people in this town better than any outsider ever could. You know what they need? You know what would help? I want your ideas. Your experiences. Your honesty." Lena looked stunned. "But we're just kids. Kids who care," Rowan said. "Kids who want to make the world better. That matters more than age." The grandmother placed a gentle hand on Lena's arm. "Maybe this is what your kindness brought into the world," she said softly. The idea of being part of something so big felt surreal to the girls. Their whole lives had been spent focusing on small struggles, buying bread, saving coins, repairing little things around the house. They never imagined anyone would ask for their help in shaping something important. "Will it really help others?" Mira asked. "Yes," Rowan said with complete certainty. "It will help many families. And your honesty will be at the heart of it." The little girl smiled shyly as the night grew quieter and the storm drifted away completely. Rowan stayed with the family a little longer to make sure everything was safe. They talked about small things, school, chores, neighbors, trying to ease the intensity of the earlier conversation. Before leaving, Rowan promised to return early the next morning with the crew. When he stepped outside, the air smelled fresh, washed clean by the rain. The sky was beginning to clear. A few stars peeked out from behind the clouds as if watching over the quiet town. Rowan felt lighter than he had felt in years. He knew that tomorrow would mark a new beginning, not just for the girls, but for him as well. Early the next morning, Rowan arrived with trucks, tools, and a full team of builders. The girls watched from the doorway as the workers transformed their home piece by piece. New beams were lifted into place. Old wood was replaced with strong, fresh materials. The walls were patched and painted. The roof was rebuilt completely, no longer a fragile cover, but a sturdy shield. Throughout the day, Rowan took breaks to sit with the family, listen to their stories, and understand their needs. He didn't treat them like people receiving charity. He treated them like partners, people he respected deeply. By the time the sun began to set, the house looked entirely different. It stood tall and strong, glowing in the soft evening light. The grandmother could hardly believe her eyes. Tears filled her eyes as she touched the new doorway. "I never dreamed of living in a place like this," she whispered. Rowan placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You deserve it." Lena and Mira ran inside the freshly painted rooms, their laughter echoing through the house. It was the sound of relief, of hope, of a future suddenly brighter. Later that evening, as the workers packed up and the town settled into its usual quiet, Rohan stood with the family outside the new home. "Your life is changing," he said softly. "Not because I stepped in, but because your honesty brought you here. Never forget that." The grandmother nodded gratefully. "We won't. And I'll be back soon," Rowan added. "We have a community center to build together." The girls smiled widely. Their eyes full of dreams they never dared to imagine before, Rowan walked back to his car, feeling something he hadn't felt in years, a deep sense of purpose. The night air felt peaceful against his skin. Every step carried a quiet truth. Sometimes the smallest act of honesty can change not just one life but many, and as he drove away, he knew this was just the beginning of something beautiful for them and for him.